Hello, and thank you for logging in. Our program will begin momentarily. Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to episode 4 of our virtual series, Courageous Conversations. My name is Jennifer Berger. I'm the Director of Marketing and Strategic Initiatives for the Walter Cates Foundation. The series is designed to offer an authentic, thought-provoking exchange of ideas and information to contribute to our industry's discourse around racial, gender, and intersectional equity, as well as many cultural issues that impact media, entertainment, and technology. At the Walter Cates Foundation, we pride ourselves on curating unique, progressive discussions. Today, we will explore artificial intelligence and DEI implications. Now, before I introduce our guests, I'd like to acknowledge the generous support of our steadfast commitment of our 2021 annual sponsors. First, I'd like to give a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Charter Communications. Our official sponsor, Comcast NBC Universal. Our benefactors, A&E, Cox Communications, ESPN, and Viacom CBS. We have many more advocates, partners, and friends that we rely on, and we thank you all. It is through their generous support that we can do the work that we do. For those of you unfamiliar with our work, we provide targeted grants to key industry organizations. We fund vital research that impacts workforce practices, and we produce educational programs like this series, the Hollywood Creative Forum. With that in mind, I'd like to remind today's audience the Walter Cates Foundation now accepts contributions from individual donors. Donations are tax deductible and can be made throughout today's program or online at waltercates.com. Okay, let's jump in. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is one of the most powerful technological transformations we're living through today. Often we interact with it every day without a second thought. Although the use of technology is not always intrinsic aspect in our discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, the reality is that our industry is growing to rely on it in many, many ways. Because of this, it is critically important that we help the dialogue and establish good governance to ensure the use of AI has a positive and beneficial impact on the communities we serve by ensuring DEI is considered every step of the way. Today's Courageous Conversation will illustrate the impact of AI on our sector and help establish best practices for innovating responsibly with artificial intelligence, particularly for diverse communities. Now, before we turn it over to our experts, here are a few of the ABCs of AI to help give context to today's program. The goal of this brief primer is to make the concept of AI simple and easy to understand for those of us who are new to AI. Technology evolves so fast, it can be intimidating. So we're glad you're joining us today, and together we're going to dip our toes into this brave new world. Artificial intelligence is the field of computer science that is associated with the concept of machines thinking like humans, to perform tasks like learning, identifying patterns, reasonings, planning, and problem solving. Natural intelligence is intelligence from your brain. That's human intelligence. Artificial intelligence is intelligence created by machines. Machines learning how to do things, whether it's identifying patterns or planning, reasoning, and problem solving. In everyday language, that's what AI is. So just like a kid growing up and learning, AI, for it to work well, it needs experiences. Or in other words, AI needs data. Now, let's switch gears for some history around AI. Did you know that artificial intelligence has been around for over 50 years? Although philosophers and researchers have long been theorizing about artificial intelligence, it was when access to digital computers became possible in the early 50s that the field of AI became more tangible. Now, keep in mind, those computers were huge, large, expensive machines and mostly used by universities and government agencies. But even one of the first ever AI conferences took place in 1955. So by this time, it's not just a guy in a garage, okay? Now, the next few decades, scientists and researchers laid the groundwork, but AI wasn't really ready to be commercialized because it was just too expensive, too slow, not scalable. Then around the 80s, research and development in aerospace and the defense industry really led to leaps and increases of enterprise success, particularly in knowledge-based systems and intelligent decision support systems. Now, don't worry, there won't be a test later. As we mentioned earlier, AI needs data. By the 1990s, our daily use of the internet became increasing by a millionfold. By 2000, Google was the top search engine. By 2008, Facebook had overtaken MySpace in worldwide popularity. And in 2010, tweet was an everyday verb. Around this time, we've got Netflix and the streaming services growing rapidly and really transforming the entertainment and the entertainment landscape. With millions upon millions of users interacting thousands of times a day with all of these systems, a huge amount of data is being generated. And to feed AI, it needs to learn from experiences. And this era of big data we're living in right now, it helps fuel AI. Some of the everyday examples of AI: navigation apps, facial recognition, like when we go to unlock our phone, autocorrect and predictive typing, check scanning to make a deposit in your bank account, call centers, the applicant tracking system when you apply for a job, and of course, streaming applications serving up suggestions of what you might like to watch. Companies also use it for digital ad targeting and enhanced customer experience, and the list goes on and on. Now, let's just get to some key terms. An algorithm is a word that you've heard bantered around a lot, but really it's a very simple concept. An algorithm is a sequence of steps to perform a task or solve a problem. An algorithm is the fundamental starting point of most any basic computer program, and they are essential in computer science. But when we're talking about AI, the magic really happens at a much deeper level, and that brings us to machine learning. Machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence that gives computers the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed or told what to do. Think of an algorithm as a basic building block. For a computer to program what you want it to do, you have to tell it step by step what you want to do. Now let's say you want to build your dream house, and to do so, you want to use those building blocks, but you want them to do much more, not just sit there and be static. Now picture this. Imagine you want that simple building block to learn on its own what the next step is, what the next step should be, and the next, and so on and so on. That's where machine learning comes in. It's the secret sauce, or really it's not so secret sauce right now in the current state of AI technology. Machine learning has become one of the most significant and common mechanisms used when deploying AI. Machine learning is behind chatbots, language translation apps, and really most of our everyday interactions with AI. Since most current advances in AI are utilizing machine learning, the terms have almost become synonymous. But let's get to the heart of the matter for today's program: AI bias. Machine learning bias, also sometimes called algorithmic bias, it's a phenomenon that occurs when an algorithm produces a result that is systematically prejudiced due to erroneous assumptions in machine learning process. Sometimes it causes unintended harm to users. Now, the common meaning of bias that we use speaking in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion is prejudice that favors something or someone or a group of people and compared with another in ways that can be unfair. Bias is a human phenomenon. AI is a technology that is built by humans. Even with the best blueprints, if the building blocks are made up of the wrong material, that dream house that we were building earlier might not be safe. AI, however, can be trained by humans to recognize bias, and AI can be trained to address DEI challenges. Listen, this is a complex issue, and I'm no expert. This brief primer was just intended to be a springboard for the upcoming discussion led by industry experts. Remember, you can be a part of today's conversations. Events like this are about building connections and participating in dialogue important to our industry, and we encourage you to use the chat feature. Okay, without further ado, let's dive deeper. We have an extremely interesting keynote presentation to help us demystify and humanize AI. Afua Bruce is a leading public interest technologist who has spent her career working at the intersection of technology, policy, and society. Her career has spanned government, nonprofit, private, academic sectors, and she has held senior science and technology roles at the White House, the FBI, and IBM. Afua is currently the Chief Program Officer at DataKind, a nonprofit whose mission it is to harness the power of data science and AI in service to humanity. Please give a warm welcome to Afua Bruce.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and thank you so much for having me today. I am so excited to dive a little bit deeper into what is artificial intelligence and how can we really use it in the workplace. As was mentioned, I am the Chief Program Officer of DataKind, which is a nonprofit whose mission is to harness the power of data science and artificial intelligence in service of humanity. We work with a number of nonprofit organizations and government agencies all around the world to do this every single day. Now at DataKind, one of the things we love to do is to chat about what we call the art of the possible. And that is to spend time with organizations to help imagine how they can use artificial intelligence to help improve their operations. We have a large organization, a number of pro bono artificial intelligence experts, and we match them to specific problems that need to be solved. And so as you heard in from the previous speaker, artificial intelligence already touches so many of our lives and so much of our lives in so many ways today. It's in the chatbots we interact with. It's how we log into our phones. It's how we even get tickets sometimes as we are driving down the road. So all different aspects of our lives. And so the future is here somewhat, but it's not always evenly distributed. So at DataKind, we really like to partner with organizations and really start with conversations about their work and their challenges, and then figure out how data science or artificial intelligence might help. And so I really, again, want to emphasize that as you're thinking about this, as you're thinking about how do we use AI, how should I think about engaging with AI, it's about starting with your business model and figuring out what challenges you have, and then figuring out the right tools to use from there. So I threw around the term data science. We've talked about AI. And so the whole fields of data science and artificial intelligence and machine learning are all very closely related. They all essentially fall under the same umbrella, and different fields emphasize slightly different things. Maybe we're looking at a little bit more statistics. We're looking about a little bit more prediction. We're looking at a little bit more of automated learning. But all of those tools, the data science, the machine learning, and the artificial intelligence are very closely related. So you'll often hear these terms together. And so just as you hear those, know why. So as we mentioned, artificial intelligence is everywhere today. And as you listen to the news, you'll probably hear a lot of examples of how artificial intelligence has gone wrong, or how it could go wrong in the future. Movies have done an excellent job of painting pictures of how artificial intelligence-powered robots could take over the world and dominate humans and do things that we might not decide to do ourselves. And flashy headlines often imply that artificial intelligence will affect the future of the work in such a way that it'll lead to most people losing their jobs. And so even though we interact with artificial intelligence every day, there's still a lot that most people don't know about artificial intelligence, and that leads to a little bit of confusion. But the reality is, when artificial intelligence is applied well, AI can really help people have better experiences with their lives. So you think of the last time you maybe interacted with a customer service chatbot that simplified your life and helped you get your issue resolved a little bit more quickly, or the last time you were looking at a streaming service and it knew exactly what to recommend that you watch next. Artificial intelligence, when applied well, can really help people have that better experience. It's also true, however, that like most technologies, without the proper care, artificial intelligence can inflict harm, it can exclude, and it can prevent access to key services and solutions. So that brings me to, I think, the main question for my keynote today that I want you to consider is, how should you be thinking about engaging with artificial intelligence? How might it affect your work in your industry? Well, I'd like you to think of it less as something big and new, but really just an evolution of how you already do business. So if we think about the sort of history of technology, history of how organizations have worked, we started with things more on paper, we transitioned to more of a digital world. And so this transition now to where artificial intelligence is more widely used to make decisions, to help increase efficiency, is really just that next evolution. And so the things you care about today will especially as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, will be what you can continue to care about in artificial intelligence empowered environments. It's important here to note that artificial intelligence isn't neutral. Because it is created by humans, this was mentioned by the previous speaker, it can exacerbate biases and it can disproportionately affect certain populations. I'm going to take you now through a couple of different examples to help you hopefully to wrap your head around how we can use artificial intelligence. So the first example I want to give you is a project that DataKind did a couple of years ago with a particular water district, with a particular organization in Southern California. This particular project was designed to help that business operate more efficiently. We partnered with a water district in Southern California in an area where droughts are incredibly common and the plague community is really affecting quality of life there. So the water district came to DataKind with the need to have accurate forecasting models of water demand. This would help for planning purposes, this would help in water distribution purposes, and more. The DataKind pro bono artificial intelligence experts worked together to really understand the problem, to analyze the problem, to analyze the data that was available, and then ultimately created a data infrastructure and dashboards to help forecast water demand at the microzone level. This was something this organization, this water district, didn't have access to before, and the analysis that was done, the algorithms that were created, really helped enable the water district to do better monitoring. So the specific models and algorithms that were developed helped improve pricing, helped expand conservation programs, helped increase the efficiency of water transportation throughout the network, and ultimately saved the water district an estimated $25 million in avoided capital storage cost. And so that's an example of how when you start with the problem, we're looking at how do we forecast demand better, and you pair it with people who understand the artificial intelligence algorithms and how to write them, who can take a look at the data and see what can be done, you can really help increase the efficiency of how an organization operates. The next example I want to take you through is an example of using AI to help better connect with communities or with customers. This year, DataKind partnered with the University of Chicago to, in their work to increase access to broadband for a diversity of communities. The University of Chicago had some ongoing work in exploring publicly available and commercial data to help define use cases and synthesize insights that demonstrate the needs and possibilities of using finer grained broadband data. By partnering with DataKind and by DataKind bringing in our, again, pro bono artificial intelligence experts, we were able to examine how to go from census tract data to neighborhood level data for broadband access. So helping, again, to really localize decision-making, to really help the organizations, and in this case, the University of Chicago and some of their community partners, really identify specific neighborhoods that needed and could get access to more broadband or a higher level of broadband. So here, once again, the folks who understood how to write those artificial intelligence algorithms were able to perform an exploratory and comparative analysis on infrastructure, on performance data sets, and really were able to generate visualizations and key insights on the strengths and shortcomings of each, and also do some comparison analysis from neighborhood to neighborhood, and actually from data set to data set. We were able to look and identify even more data sets to help elevate the analysis one additional level and provide that University of Chicago team with more factors to analyze and to help build cases for how to really equip private sector partners and nonprofit partners and more for increasing access to broadband in particular neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods with lower socioeconomic status or in areas that were populated by majority and minority communities to help increase access to broadband. So especially with this example, we can see how the techniques, when you describe them simply, doing data analysis, figuring out how to predict the next step, are both things that we have done in different ways in the past, ways that have taken a long time, taken lots of paper, lots of spreadsheets, and you start to automate that process with artificial intelligence, and then can better use what's generated from the artificial intelligence to drive further decision making and really speed up the process to action by different players. The final example that I want to take you through is an example of something that a high-tech company recently did as it relates to hiring. So we've talked about artificial intelligence in how it can be used to help increase efficiency with operations, how it can be used to better connect with your customers or your communities. But finally, it's also important to think about how organizations, how businesses can use artificial intelligence internally to help improve the efficiency of their internal operations as well. So this particular tech company valued the importance of data and wanted to develop an algorithm to help identify who would be successful or senior level employees, which of their current employees were going to be well poised to be promoted and to succeed at that next level within the organization. It seems straightforward enough. They had a lot of people, they had a lot of data, and they wanted to really make data-based solutions. So why not develop an algorithm to help speed up this process and to make it really data-driven? After this algorithm was developed and it was run, it quickly became apparent that the algorithm showed that this high-tech company, white men were the ones who should be provided. And when you dug in a little deeper, it wasn't because white men specifically were inherently better at these jobs, but it's because the data that they used, being a tech company and subject to all of the known biases about hiring in tech already, reflected in that data. Therefore, as the algorithms were built, the algorithms and the output of the algorithms reflected that biased data. I'll just note the company ended up not rolling out this program. They didn't use this algorithm once this was identified, but it does highlight for us the importance of making sure that as you think about employing artificial intelligence in your workplace, you are also thinking about the importance of data, right? The data and artificial intelligence isn't without flaws when not done with care. So in addition to the business model that you're thinking about and the challenge that you're going to address, when you think about engaging with artificial intelligence, you also want to make sure you are asking the folks who are implementing this artificial intelligence about the data that's being used. It's a real opportunity to have some substantive conversations with folks to think intentionally about data collection and user privacy. It's true whether you're looking to improve internal operations or whether you're looking to improve your external business operations. Really think through how you can encourage people to be inclusive rather than exclusive, and what that looks like from a data perspective and what that looks like from an artificial intelligence algorithm creation perspective. Essentially, you want to think of these conversations about artificial intelligence that you might have across your organizations as extensions to the conversations you're already having about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to close with a quote from one of my mentors. He often says, behind every number is a name, behind every name is a story, and every story matters. Successful adoption of artificial intelligence is about both who develops the AI and who is affected by the AI. It's about the impact that AI can have on lives and businesses, of course. Artificial intelligence presents a lot of opportunities, but we can't lose sight of the fact that ultimately the reason why we're doing this work is to affect different lives. It's for those individual stories and about the story that we tell collectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afua. That was incredible. And I love that you said, that every story matters. Every person's stories matter. It's something important to the Cates Foundation. What a wealth of information, and those 3 life cases that you gave and your suggestions and guidance is incredible food for thought. So thank you. Now, a friendly reminder for everybody to get into the conversation. You can submit your questions for the panel in the chat, and we're going to get to as many of the questions as we can. But now, rounding out today's experience, we have an enriching panel discussion. Leading this conversation is Andreen Soley. Andreen is the director of the Public Interest Technology University Network at New America. As a thought leader in media ecology, Andreen wants to help technologists transform the world for better. Please help me welcome to the stage today's moderator for AI and DEI, A Brave New World, Andreen Soley.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Andreen Soley, as Jennifer said. I'm the director of the Public Interest Technology Program at New America, a new kind of think and action think. A civic platform that connects research institutes, a technology lab, a solutions network, media hub, and a public forum. Specifically, the Public Interest Technology Program is at the core of the work at New America. Essentially what we do, and you've probably heard Afua mention this, and helpful to note that Afua used to work at New America, is that we adopt best practices ranging from data science, product development, and human-centered design to tackle public problems in an inclusive and iterative manner. So in many ways, the example that Afua gave in her presentation, that second example about the water utilities, that's a helpful example of the kinds of things that we hope to tackle in the Public Interest Technology Program at New America. More importantly, I just want to also communicate that we have a Public Interest Technology University network. And that is a collaboration between universities and colleges that are committed to building the field of public interest technology and growing a new generation of civic-minded technologists with an explicit aim to focus on equity, diversity, and social justice. The public interest framework is particularly compelling and interesting for us as we think about algorithmic bias and some of the challenges that Afua raised in her presentation, and how we have to make sure that whatever data sets we're using are mined in the correct way, and that we're also really responsive with the things that we want to do. I think one of the key things that you noticed in her presentation is, what are the questions you're asking? What are sort of the limits that can be contained in your data sets, and what are the things that your data sets cannot answer? It's a key question for us in the Public Interest Technology Program. And so one of the things I want to talk about is that with the backlash we have seen around against traditional tech culture, ethics, and the lack thereof, this conversation we're hoping to have today is central to making the space more just and inclusive. To continue the conversation and dive deeper on how AI can have unintended harms and how to mitigate them, we have a great panel with industry experts that will talk about how the industry is changing to meet the demand of diverse and inclusive services. I'm pleased to have the panelists introduce themselves. First of all, starting with Orlando. Over to you, Orlando.
Orlando Hampton. I am the Chief Customer Officer at Affinity. I'm also a member of the Global Board of Directors for the WIC Network. Happy to be here today and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Brajesh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brajesh Jha. and I'm responsible for the global media and entertainment business at Genpact. And I feel very passionately about the sensible usage of AI when it comes to all kinds of media and entertainment related activities. We are a global professional service firm with over 100,000 employees working in 90 centers in nearly 30 countries around the world. And we serve over 800 clients and help transform their business through all kinds of process and operational excellence work. So deploying digital solutions such as AI is very central to who we are.
Looking forward to unpacking that. Raquel?
Thank you, Audrine. Hi, everyone. My name is Raquel Zuzard, and I'm the founder and CMO at Equity Project for All, which is a brand consultancy that bridges the gap between brand performance and social impact. I also serve on the board of directors at Kellify USA, which is an AI company that's looking to use AI for good and help improve DE&I outcomes. I'm excited about today's conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing both sides of the conversation on AI, the force for good, the force for growth, and at the same time recognizing the bias and the risks that we have to go in with eyes wide open. So thanks for having me.
And finally, Shelly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shelly Gross, and I am the Executive Director of Strategic Planning and Talent Solutions at Comcast. Shout out to some Comcasters I see in the chat. And my role at Comcast has evolved over the last 13 years. I've primarily spent my career leading recruiters and recruiting leaders in the fulfillment of business needs for Comcast. But just over the past 3 years, I've leaned into becoming a technologist. I served as a subject matter expert for our Workday implementation over the last couple of years. We are Workday customers officially as of January 4th of this year, so have a year under my belt of enhancing our system. But really partly that experience into a role that is now responsible for a broader scope, inclusive of a roadmap for our talent organization, and that dips into learning and development at Comcast these days as well. So really I'm excited to be a learner on this panel as well as a participant and contributor. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for that, Shelly. And I hope that we're all going to be receptive to be learners here. One thing I want to say is before we begin, let me remind you that you can drop questions in the Q&A and the chat, and we'll be actively monitoring them for your Q&A sessions at the very end. But let's get started with Orlando and Brajesh. I want to sort of dive a little bit deeper in the work that you all do. Both Affinity and Genpact are industry leaders using AI to help businesses connect to their audiences and provide tailored solutions for their needs. Affinity's leading technology analyzes billions of interactions between businesses and clients to pair customers with agents using machine learning models, and Genpact offers several services from logistics and financial planning, all based on data analytics and AI, all things that our wonderful keynote mentioned. Can you talk us through how your company utilizes AI to deliver better customer service? What does that look like concretely for our audience? I'll start with you, Brajesh.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much, Andreen. And once again, I'm delighted to be here. That was a fantastic introduction that Afua provided on AI, and it just makes it much easier for us to explain our concepts. So when it comes to Genpact, we are a world leader in running financial services operations, and that means nearly 20,000 colleagues, having over 750 million customer interactions in any given year. So we were already on a journey of deeply embedding AI into all kinds of operations. But what COVID did is it has absolutely accelerated all of it. And if you think about customer service, the way it is done now, and now what the expectations have become, they are all about, they expect it to be seamless, channel agnostic, and highly personalized. Everyone wants a white glove service now. So most important thing is that there are unstated expectation of compassion in the interactions. And sometimes an interaction could highlight biases that otherwise could go undetected. So if you look at the big picture of how AI plays a role in this, The first step is the pre-interaction work. So here we have all kinds of customer segmentation that we do using data that we have, first-party data, third-party data, and all that. And we do customer journey mapping, persona design of the people that are likely to get in touch, and having a deep understanding of those individual customers and the kind of reasons that lead to customer service. So what AI does is it allows for predictive analytics in terms of offering real-time insights to the agents who are talking to clients. And it prevents the hassles from happening because it is literally acting as your augmented version of you. And it provides you with all kinds of real-time insights as to this interaction that you're having. Is that going well? Is that not going well? Are you going to give a solution that might actually solve the problem, or will it lead to further complications down the line? So these are all real-time guidances that come through the leveraging AI into this. Now, the next part of this is where the actual interaction takes an agent or someone who is talking to a client towards solutions that are not just intended to solve the immediate problem, but to fix a solution or put a solution in place that will fix more systemic problems. And essentially connecting the dots between what we call as a channel-driven revenue growth option. So certain brands expect that during those interactions, you get opportunities to also create a positive impression of a brand, and you want revenue options to be coming up through that. So again, AI comes in all of those areas in terms of providing guidance. And then finally, in terms of the post-interaction insight, the level of emotional exchange that was going on a call, the kind of interaction that could lead to something that future agents could be trained upon. And all of this is done automatically using AI again. So we've got very powerful tools that not only make it possible to do hyper-personalization, they also make it possible for coaching agents and coaching them on empathy and connecting the dots between things which are said openly and things which are not said by the person on the other end. So in all of these various areas, AI has become a super, super important aspect. And as we continue further, I will talk more about how bias gets into all of it. So that would be even more interesting to talk about.
Well, I want to sort of jump there, right, with Orlando, because I'm curious, Orlando, if you can sort of talk about maybe a little bit differently how your company might apply it, and then also tackle the question of, Burdesh mentioned a lot of data, right? That's one of the things that feeds these systems. So when you think about the data that's being collected in such an interaction that he's just identified, what are the measures that your company puts in place to make sure that you're reducing bias in the modeling? What are the kinds of assumptions that are being sort of shaped by the information that's being collected and the connections that are being made in terms of the equation that the algorithm needs to feed off of?
Yeah, I'd be glad to get into it. So at Affinity, around 15 years ago, we were dealing with the challenge around customer experience. And so the simplest version of this is before Affinity existed, if you called into a contact center, for instance, you could call in, there could be hundreds of agents available. And the actual pairing between caller and agent was actually random. If you called in 5 seconds later, you would have spoken to a different agent. If that agent had wrapped up their last call 10 seconds sooner, they would have spoken to a different customer who's calling in. If you think about it, so imagine in the cable space, imagine a contact center with 1,000 agents in it. There are agents there who use pay-per-view movies. There are agents who have multiple devices running on broadband. There are agents who download movies on their phone. There are agents who never watch movies. There's all kinds of behavioral characteristics that exist there within agents. If you're a customer and you happen to be calling in, you're having a problem with your service, it is Thursday night, it is 9 o'clock, Dancing with the Stars is finally about to reveal the winner, and you're having a serious problem with your service and you call in, if you happen to be connected with an agent who is also into Dancing with the Stars, immediately the urgency of that situation becomes apparent, right? And we need to get this fixed right away. This is a seriously urgent matter. Randomly, you could have been connected with an agent who had never even heard of Dancing with the Stars, who may say, well, I don't know, maybe we have 15 minutes to correct this issue. It's not that big of a deal. We can sort this out. So the actual behavioral characteristics, things that we know about the customers and know about the agents, if you use this correctly and you compare these things correctly, you can drive much greater customer experience, better customer experience for the customers that ultimately leads to more profitable and better interactions for our customers, right? So at a very high level, that's what we're trying to do, is increase the likelihood of successful pairings between callers and agents in contact centers. But even in non-contact center environments, any place where there is a random pairing, can you use intelligence to try to get a pairing that is more likely to be successful, right? So that's at the core of what we do. Then if you think about it, to your point around bias and how bias can creep into these things. One thing that I would say, and I thought the primer was excellent talking about this, is that if you keep in mind that AI, artificial intelligence, is merely a tool. It is not like a tool for evil or a tool for good. It's merely a tool that could be used for evil or good, depending on whose hands that tool is in. And I say this because if you think about just bias, before AI existed, humans do a fine job of being biased on our own, right? There are lots of things. I was looking at some statistics today. 14.5% of all men are 6 feet or taller, yet 58% of Fortune 500 CEOs are 6 feet or taller. In presidential elections, regardless of parties or incumbent status, there have only been 2 times where the shorter candidate actually won the election. So I use those as examples to think about human bias, right? Things that affect us as humans. Artificial intelligence gives us an opportunity to maybe eradicate some of that stuff. You could literally just program that out. You could say, ignore height in this equation and don't take height into consideration. And suddenly, height is not part of this bias in that situation. So these things can work for good. On the flip side, you can institutionalize the problem in artificial intelligence, right? You could, instead of just being biased sometimes, it could be biased all the time because you build into the algorithm some inherent bias into that situation. So, monitoring that can be a really big deal. At Affinity, we follow all of the regulatory compliance, but recognizing that this is still immature regulations in terms of AI in a lot of markets we serve. So our goal is to actually go beyond compliance. It's not to just simply follow the rules as they stand out. So all of the data is always mutually agreed with the client before the data is collected by Affinity as a service. We continue to avoid using any kind of discriminatory or sensitive personal information, and we try to have common policies across the globe. Importantly, we use on and off benchmarking in our technology, so it's a pure technology solution. So you think about it, we will run the systems pairing customers from 9 until 9:25 a.m. From 9:25 to 9:30, we turn off. From 9:30 to 9:55, we're back on and off again. And what that does is that allows you to actually measure precisely the impact that Affinity is having and compare it to what the impact would be if Affinity was off. So we're able to actually measure, well, what would these pairings have been if Affinity was off? And the measurement is important because then, of course, you can check for bias. You can check to see if there are some unintended consequences, if there's some group that is somehow harmed, if there is a negative ramification that's coming out of this. So we'll talk about this more in great detail, but the first thing that I would say with this is that measurement is critically important. One of the tricky places that people get themselves into discussions around bias is they say, well, we don't know if it's biased or not. So our answer is we don't measure it, so how do we know if it's biased? We never knew. This inadvertent bias, regardless of whether bias is intentional or unintentional, it's still problematic. So the best way to go about it is to measure, to make sure that you're not creating a biased situation, and you have to be on top of that.
So I want to pull in Raquel here, because I think Orlando said a couple of things in there that I might push back on. First of all, the idea that technology is a tool just on its own, right? Because technology in some sense has values embedded in it, right? In terms of, do you want things to go fast because you value speed? Do you want things to be efficient because you value efficiency? So I'm curious, Raquel, talk a little bit to us about how AI plays out in the work that you do with Fortune 500 companies, and how do you deal with algorithmic bias? And what are the things you've observed?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the major challenges when it comes to AI and bringing it in is ensuring that there is the right type of what I call brave leadership to go with it. And that brave leadership really is all about humans. And it's about making sure that when you are introducing a new technology, whether it's Salesforce, Einstein, or, the new Google Cloud Gopher large language system that's coming through these days, it's always asking, like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And the companies and brands that are able to define that problem in terms of a human problem are the ones that are approaching it the right way. And often, whether it's an issue of consistency or process or speed or scale, it always goes back to, what is it that's causing the challenge? And then asking very carefully, how can AI and how can machine learning as part of that help us automate parts of our role that allow us to then focus on the human aspect, focus on that conversation on Dancing with the Stars, what Orlando just talked about. So allow us to really elevate our game from, having to spend a lot of time and a lot of that number crunching and intelligence gathering to rely on the machine trained by us, mitigating bias by us, to answer that human question. And brands that are doing that well are also very much ensuring they have a coalition of the willing, if you like. From the CEO to the president of the brands that I work with, they walk the talk. So it's not just, coming from your technology group or coming from perhaps your CSR group if it's more to do with social good. It's actually coming from the very top and really outlining, what are the behavioral standards? What are the systems and standards and protocols that we are going to put in place, to get that perfect equation? Because it's AI plus human judgment plus guardrails. And that is the formula that, has been successful and I've seen successfully implemented, including with the group that I'm working very closely with right now, Calify USA, that had this tremendous AI technology to detect the level of diversity, equity, and inclusion across every visual and verbal point of communication. So thousands and millions of Instagram and Facebook posts across videos on YouTube, and really give you a scorecard and say, this is what your balance is when it comes to gender, when it comes to age, when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to, body type. And these are the ways that you can address that. So what happens is that when you've got that information in terms of visual communication, the teams can then focus on the creative execution, the story, the human element, and, getting that right. And just as a little anecdote for folks to really appreciate the power of AI, back in 2012, Disney, released a film called John Carter, I believe, and it was like $350 million in terms of investment. And the AI machine predicted it wouldn't do well, and guess what? It didn't do well. And so what you are able to see is that this machine can be very smart, but it's only as smart as you allow it to be. And it's only as impactful as the human element in terms of execution. So from, predicting success to movies to writing recently, well, I think a few years ago, Guardian did an article that was completely written by GPT-3, which is a type of system, an AI system that actually wrote an entire article through a machine, was edited by a human, and was titled, this was written by an AI machine, don't be afraid. Some of you might remember that article. The absolute ability for AI to make a difference is just unimaginable. But the ability for it to make a very bad difference is tragic. And so that's where humans really have to be part of it. And the brands that are winning are the ones that are very clear on the human definition of the problem, clear on the human process, and clear on the human performance metrics as well.
Thanks for that, Raquel. And I think I want to pull in Shelly, and then we can have a sort of a little bit more general back and forth. I think one of the things that I think is really valuable about what Raquel has said is the human element in this, Shelly. And so I really want to hear you sort of talk about how the talent management portion of this. Because in many ways, what Raquel has confirmed for us is that the leadership matters, and how DEI plays out at all levels of the organization matters, right? So it's almost as if your culture at your organization will be translated in the technologies that you use, right? Rather than thinking that your technology is going to save your company, in many ways it will reflect what your company is all about. So can you talk to us a little bit about the sort of talent management challenges around this work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can probably pull threads in from each of my fellow panelists, because as I've been listening to comments about how it's being leveraged across financial services or through call center technology, there's comments in there that really flow through into how it will be applied into hiring processes, for example, as well. So as I mentioned in my introduction, one of the premier investments that Comcast has made most recently in this space is with our partner Workday, where we intend to evolve with Workday and leverage the machine learning and AI capabilities that they have to offer. So across our talent acquisition, talent management, and learning and development suite, we've made this workflow, we've made this investment to automate workflow and enhance the employee and candidate experience. So Brajesh, to your point, I'd love to, maybe someday we could grab a coffee and I could share my candidate journey maps with you and we could compare notes, because we do just the same in consideration for how we might leverage machine learning or even more simply automation to provide that experience to our candidates as well. With full intention, Raquel, we intend to be courageous and brave leaders as we go on this journey across the talent space to ensure that AI is fostering our culture and our commitment to inclusivity and to DE&I. And I think a lot of that often starts with building AI on top of really strong foundational processes that you've potentially been operating with for years and years. And so even leading up to this journey where we're just dipping our toes in, but about to make further investments, we have spent, quite frankly, years turning over every stone on a consistent basis to make sure that we are not inadvertently, by policy or practice or process, excluding and even taking it to another level to make sure that we are actively including all. Some examples of that might be, I would share, mentioned Workday. Yeah, we're just about ready to go live in January with what is called the Career Hub in Workday. And when I say dipping my toes in it, what Career Hub is going to offer to our employees is the opportunity for the machine to suggest to them jobs, gigs, mentor matches, or learning opportunities that match their skills or skill interests or have common skills or skill interests. So that is huge from a perspective of, certainly we own the message at Comcast that each of our employees plays a role in owning and developing their own career. But we really feel strongly that this is a step forward for us as a company to help aid in that and to help give equal opportunity to all who are looking to build a career at Comcast.
So one thing I wanted to ask for to the entire panel, and I'm going to also take the opportunity to take a look at some of the questions that are coming in from the chat. As companies that rely on AI and are beginning to rely on AI, I know you all have heard the phrase, the term regulation. That's a big question for us. And so the thing I want us to talk a little bit about in this section is, what do you think are the key priority areas for working with governments to help mitigate the harms that are here? We are talking about them not just as customers, right? We really have to think about this in terms of harms to people and communities. So Brajesh, I want to start with you because It's been a while since we've heard you, and I know it's a big panel. So I just want to start there and see what some of your thoughts are about that.
Sure. And it's fascinating to hear. Everyone seems to be talking about very, very relevant and interconnected issues, and I'm learning so much. So Shelly, definitely we should talk further on that topic. Coming to the specific question that you asked, Andreen, I'll start with a very simple example, GDPR. Raquel talked about Guardian, and in Europe, that's where the GDPR started. And when it comes to the simplest activity of hiring someone, bringing someone into an organization, if you take the traditional way of assessing candidates, way before AI started, you met someone, and whatever biases you have as a recruitment individual or someone representing the company, your biases played a factor. Now you come to the world of AI, and all of you probably have heard of the Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. He wrote the famous book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. There's a very simple concept that it comes up, where if you meet an individual, in a fraction of a second, you interpret something about that individual. It's not a conscious effort. You are not thinking whether this individual is tall or short or young or old, what racial mix-up might be involved in, all of that. It just happens. And if you think about artificial intelligence, it is essentially mimicking the way human brain is wired. So you've got an artificial neural network that is taking data and building a knowledge and a framework which is based upon the amount of data that it consumes. So if you take the governmental regulations, much of that is coming from the fact that is your AI algorithm producing decisions or insights that can be explained or not. And it goes back to Daniel Kahneman's point that if you are thinking fast through the subconscious layer, you may not be able to explain why you came up with that bias about an individual. Why? Because it's based on historical data that your brain has been capturing ever since you were a child. And literally that's how an artificial intelligence machine learning model, based on the type of data that it has been fed, the type of algorithms that have been written, it is likely to generate those insights. Therefore, there are three important elements in any machine learning model. There is the compliance, there is the ethics aspect of it, and there is the explainable AI ML model. And these are the three critical elements that our data scientists within Genpact, they have ensured that there are very important pillars that are included in any model that they build. And there are distinct areas such as live model monitoring, change management, introducing bias mitigation, data profile audits, and ensuring that there is a leadership framework around data ethics officers that are looking at data from time to time, and ensuring that there is enough of diversity in all of the innovation activities that happen. So the net of it is that if there is high level of awareness about this bias that can creep into your model, and there is a heightened awareness of the historical bias and incomplete data that can lead to that kind of bias, then you can get into all kinds of mitigation activities, and eventually that leads to conforming to the governmental regulations.
So I want to draw Raquel and Orlando into this, but I want to also just pull up a question that came up, which is, what role does AI play in recruiting neurodiverse talent in the workplace? Raquel, I want to throw that to you, because I think this question of kind of brave leadership gets at the elements that Prakash is talking about, which is, how do you unpack what the machine is revealing to you and then have it translate into policy on the ground? And in some ways, you have to have that marriage between the machine and the human to be really effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to identifying, the type of talent that's going to be a high-performing member of your team, I think to some extent machines are going to give you some of the answer. But a lot of the answer is really going to be back to what I was talking about in terms of that, that human element. If you're looking for someone who has that neurodiversity, then the first question, forget the machines, is where do you find people like that? Where are they? What are they studying at colleges and universities? Are they even at colleges and universities? Because one of the biggest issues in the tech industry and in so many industries is a requirement for a 4-year college degree, when someone can have exceptional experience, life experience and work experience doing other things in terms of their vocation or their interests. And so really, I think it's asking, where are these individuals that have this neurodiversity aptitude, and how do I attract them? How do I compose and create an employer brand proposition? So if I am brand X, why is it great to work for my company? How do we nurture, develop, and really enhance the careers of people that come from a neurodiverse background? Give me some case studies and examples. Show me evidence that this has worked, because you've had people rise through the ranks within the company. And I think when you start looking at it again from that human element and really mapping out, just like, you were saying, Rajesh, in terms of the journey mapping, where you will find these individuals with that talent, and then where does your talent team plug into that? What is the pipeline and process for actually getting them to raise their hand and say, yes, I want that internship at Comcast or at NBC or at Viacom. Like, I want that, because I've seen evidence that they treat people with my background as heroes. They give us opportunities to shine. So, looking at your talent pipeline is really important. Looking at your process and how you make decisions is really important. We know that the applicant tracking system has so many flaws. We could do a whole session on that. In so many ways. So it's really asking, what are some of the other ways besides, in addition to technology, that can help us identify those individuals, and then use the AI to help you make better decisions on, the type of skill sets. And perhaps in some cases, there are case studies that are done as part of the interview process. How can you assess the individual using those case studies, but doing it in a fair way, and then giving them the opportunity to come in as an intern and do the work. So I think that really it's about having an open mind and not relying on AI as the answer to everything. It's the answer to some things, but it's not the answer to everything. And it is certainly not the answer by itself. It's always kind of amplified, augmented by the humanity aspect. And in many ways, I love calling it augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, because the intelligence is human. We're the intelligence factor. We're the power that powers the machines. The machine obeys our commands. And so we have to make those commands just, ethical, transparent, and always, always consistent to get to the result we want.
That sounds like a wonderful wrap up. And I want to make sure that I give Orlando and Shelly an opportunity to just kind of close out, in terms of the topics we covered today. We covered lots of different things, but I think the central question seems to be, who are the humans in your organization? What are they tasked with doing? What do you all do well? And so in terms of the one thing that you'd love our audience to take away from this conversation, I'm going to start with you, Shelly, and then I'll come all the way back around to Rajesh. But I want to just give you all a chance to start there. Shelly, Orlando, Rajesh, and then Raquel.
Yeah, thank you, Andreen. I wanted to add very briefly to the question around neurodiversity, just an experience I had today. We were getting a demo from a vendor, and they were introducing a product that leverages an assessment and voice recognition or voice evaluation as part of their assessment tool. And as we were asking a lot of questions, a partner of mine has a son on the spectrum and asked a very specific question on how this might work for him. For example, the parent described him as not having the highest self-esteem. He speaks a little slowly. So the question was coming from a personal place around how would voice work with a candidate who may be less confident than another candidate? And the answer was extremely interesting, which was the machine doesn't look for that, or you can tell the machine not to look for those things, but purely strip those things out. To your point, Brajesh, when you meet someone in person for the first time, that's probably something that kicks off some of those automatic sparks in your biased brain. How fast does the person talk? How slowly does the person have a firm handshake? How do they display when you first lay eyes on them? The machine doesn't take any of those things into account, rather is evaluating the experience that the person shared, or the competency that the person shared, the solution that the person came up with as an answer to that question. So we're very encouraged. In closing, I will say an article that I read recently said something to the effect of the 80-20 rule exists out there, that 80% of executives surveyed say they're concerned about bias, or they worry about human bias creeping into their processes from a hiring perspective. And yet 20% are committed to doing what they need to do to leverage AI to mitigate that bias. I feel strongly that Comcast is moving forward aggressively and with that brave leadership to make sure that we take advantage of every tool and technology out there to continue to strengthen our processes, our selection processes, our hiring processes, our development of our people who are very clearly to us, our most valuable asset.
And Orlando?
Totally amazing. This is, I've learned so much stuff here, so many powerful points. Raquel, you said something that really kind of resonated with me because I get this all the time in my business. People ask me, why does Affinity have 3,000 employees, right? You guys are artificial intelligence. I would assume you just got a couple robots and some servers in the back that are creating these algorithms and updating themselves. But it is very labor-intensive human work. And those humans, that diverse group of humans, being part of a transparent data collection process and trained to understand what are the rules and what are the ethics associated with it. Those are the people who actually really keep the systems aligned. The one message you asked Andreen if I could get people to walk away from is that, look, contrary to popular belief, the robots are not here to take over the world. Hollywood has done a great job of this for at least 50 years of suggesting that robots are just almost smart enough to take over everything. The idea of augmented intelligence is an excellent way of thinking about it, because the most functional AI uses today are actually things that are making humans better in the work that humans do every day. If you think about just in this, in our business, one of the things, I'll give you an example. I'm old enough to remember when you only had a couple channels on television. And so everybody was watching kind of the same thing. We all had 3 or 4 choices. And then those choices started to expand to more and more choices. And we had variation. We'd go to a video store, but you could only rent 1 or 2 videos. You had to make a decision of what we're watching tonight as a family. But then as storage became cheaper and easier to come by, that's expanded. And now all of us have hundreds, if not thousands of choices of entertainment every night. So what has happened with that is that we went from something where first we were all watching one of our limited choices. The next thing that was important was search, right? Our libraries got bigger, so you had to start searching for what you wanted to watch. But now our libraries are so massive, search has been quietly replaced with suggestion. And lots of people have kind of missed that, that evolution from search to suggestion. But now the libraries are so deep that searching is kind of out of the question. So we all rely on suggestion. Here is what you should watch. Here is what you should read. This is the place where AI becomes a very powerful thing. And you have to ask yourself these questions around, what is the AI trying to accomplish in this case? Am I the product in this case? So are they trying to keep me engaged and keep me on a service and to keep me looking at a certain thing? Is there another product at play? Can I use this to train myself to get competing viewpoints or different things? So being conscious of that, search has been kind of replaced by suggestion, and then thinking about how those suggestions are coming into your life. I think that's something that most of us should spend more time thinking about, because I find that most people have not really recognized that change. And what they think is because they're getting suggested lots of things that happen to align with their worldview, they assume that they're more educated, right? They're saying, well, this isn't just my viewpoint. I also read 10 things on it. But what they missed is that those things were suggested. They didn't actually go out and find those things. And so those are the kinds of things that I would just encourage people to think about, is like, how are you interacting with artificial intelligence tools on a regular basis? And then what is the goal of that tool in that particular circumstance? Often it is not to educate you, it is to monetize you.
So I'm always it's really important for me to give people a chance to give their final say. So Brajesh and Raquel, I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to just say a takeaway that you'd love the audience to have here. Go ahead, Brajesh, and I'll end with you, Raquel. Oh, I think we might have lost your sound, Brajesh.
You hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Andreen. And Orlando, I loved your description. You're an AI company. You should just have a couple of robots doing your job. That's a common story I hear from a lot of AI companies. So it is absolutely critical to pay attention to what Raquel was saying in terms of thinking of it as an augmented intelligence scenario. And our chief people officer is very big on that concept, because for us, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is all the way through. So AI is used in attracting diverse talent, creating a supportive ecosystem, building leaders, driving inclusion, and then cultivating an external network that allows for them to flourish. And if you think about it, the kind of data that we have, there's a lot of trade-off that is involved. You want to ensure that privacy issues are catered to, you want to ensure all kind of biases are removed and so on. So at the end of the day, if you can have the right kind of ecosystem, which is, again, compliant, ethical, and explainable, it can actually make it much easier to drive the level of diversity in your organization. And if that is truly achieved, we are, in our 100,000 employees, we are still at about 45% in terms of diversity. Our goal is to take it much higher, but the diversity of thought, skills, experiences, and the background, that is the surest way to create a better world and a better business as well.
Thank you. And Raquel?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I want, I guess, our listeners tonight to think about is what's your role today in the AI ecosystem? Are you a recipient? Are you a creator? Are you a decision maker? Are you a contributor? What role do you play? And what role do you want to play? And then draw a line between those two things and ask yourself what needs to happen. Because we need every voice to be at the table for this one. I liken this to the discovery of fire in our ancestors. Dangerous, but powerful, and helped us advance civilization. I'm saying artificial intelligence has that ability. We have to go from it being a danger power to a superpower, a good power. And that means everyone at the table, everyone asking those three major questions. What's the problem we're trying to solve? How is it involve humans in solving the problem? And how do we make sure the machine is by our side like a trusty companion doing what we're asking it to do in the right way, asking the right questions, not it controlling us, but we controlling it. And, in tech, we love to say, move fast and break things. And I will leave you with this. Move fast and learn things. Learn from each other, learn from the machines, make the machines smart, but you stay smarter. That's my contribution.
Thank you so much for that. I want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists. You all have been wonderful and thoughtful panelists today. I hope you all learn from each other because I definitely learned from you. And I also want to thank our host, the Walter Cates Foundation, for making this opportunity available to all of us that are here today. Most importantly, I do want to thank the audience for taking time out of their day to join us. I appreciate that. And I know this has been a challenging and long year, but I hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season. And I'm hoping that we will see many more of these conversations next year. And I want to leave you with one thought, which is that it's important for us to center our humanity and know that we don't have to escape bias. What we can say to ourselves is this machine will reveal our bias, and that gives us information. And so the notion that the machine might be a magical tool, I like your idea, Raquel, that it's walking alongside us. And so I think the narrative around who's in control, to Orlando's point, is really important for us to take with us as we go on this journey together. Fire starters, we all are, I guess, right? So thank you for that. And over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you so much, Andreen, for leading that great conversation. Thank you, Shelly, Raquel, Rajesh, Orlando. Just amazing conversation. I also want to give a special thanks to our keynote speaker, Afua Bruce. And we appreciate all of you sharing your time, your insights, and your expertise. The goal of this program was to help prepare you to have courageous conversations of your own, whether it be at your workplace or with your friends around the dinner table. We wish we could live in a perfect world where bias doesn't exist, but it does. And since AI is just an extension of us, humans, it's imperative to work towards good governance and best practices to ensure our industry is innovating responsibly with AI from a DEI perspective. At the Cates Foundation, we're very excited to see how humans will use AI in the future and address the human challenges and help harness the power of AI for good and be that companion with us. Special thanks out goes to our longtime industry collaborators that were essential behind-the-scene guides helping us tackle this complex subject. Thank you to our sponsors for their continued support, and of course, a special thanks to each of you for attending. One shameless last plug, the Walter Cates Foundation is accepting contributions from individual donors, and all contributions are tax deductible. You can click on donate before you log off or go to waltercates.org. And remember, it is our responsibility to take the information that we learn in these forums and implement them in the day-to-day approach to our work. While words may inspire, only action creates real change. Thank you.